So during the pandemic, this administration, the current administration of the Cherokee Nation, laid off 8 or 9 primary care physicians. Do you think we've been able to replace those people? We have not. So suddenly people can't get appointments. Or they only have a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant in many of our facilities with very little oversight, maybe 1 MD or DO per like 8 or 9 nurse practitioners and such. It has put a tremendous strain on our facilities.
So we have one more speaker this evening that I hope you're excited to hear from. Cara Cowan Watts is running for chief of the Cherokee. Cara, this would, if you should win, you would be the 2nd female chief? That's correct. First one being Wilma Mankiller. That's right, back in the 80s. Just real briefly, if you're not familiar with Cara, she's one of 2 candidates who are running currently. She served as the elected tribal legislator for portions of Tulsa and Rogers County for 12 years from 03 to 15. I'm not going to read all of this, but she is an 8th generation resident of Rogers County, or what is now known as Rogers County. And she's a direct descendant of old settler Cherokee Chief John Rogers, who lived in, I will not even try to pronounce that name, what she said, in the district of the Cherokee Nation. So we want to hear from Cara tonight and have her share with us her thoughts and her plans for running for chief. Thank you for being with us.
So now we don't know what this election will look like given that population pool, but in the past, the largest number of people to vote, and it was about 320,000 people, was 20,000 people voted for the chief and the deputy chief, and then the 17 council members. So we're talking about a very small population making very big decisions in terms of leadership. And we know that this was the case even before McGirt. But as an engineer and small business owner and wife and aunt and all the other roles I play in my community and my family, it is mission critical that we have better leadership come forward in the Cherokee Nation, which is why I'm here tonight asking you to help me win this election, okay? So a little bit about me. I am married, I guess successfully now I can say, because that's a 2-year pandemic and it's going to be 17 years, I think, in November. So the fact that I've been his boss at our small construction company and we have a 1-room farm, it's a kind of a loft inside it was a working horse barn we converted to a house. The 100 acres was not big enough, okay, with that house during 2 years of pandemic, because remember, I'm his boss and I go home to him. But I think that success shows that I can weather any storm, and I'm ready for, you know, the complexities of running. Really, it's a $2.5 billion budget annually. They inflated it this last year by holding $1 billion of our federal tax dollars. So it looks like it's $3.5 billion, but it's really a $2.5 billion budget. Several thousand employees. I want to say with the businesses, it's approximately 12,000 employees now. So we're talking about a significant impact in Northeast Oklahoma, and that's not even when you start multiplying in terms of economic factors. This is critical. If you have a Cherokee neighbor, a Cherokee coworker, someone you graduated from high school with, I am asking you to dig deep in your, I'm just old enough to know what a Rolodex is, but whatever that is, you know, get out and find somebody that's going to be your vote in this election. We need to compel. I know from my data that the majority of Cherokee citizens have conservative values. That's whether they live in Oklahoma, whether they live in the Cherokee Nation, but even broadly, at least maybe not across the world because we do have people internationally, but inside the United States, they're either registered Republican or they're Democrats that vote conservative. We know that from our data. So I'm asking you, please, after you listen to me tonight, to reach out to them and compel them to get registered to vote by March 31st and to request an absentee ballot. And we're going to talk a little bit about absentee ballots because I know that's uncomfortable in conservative circles. But the reality is Cherokees have mainly had to vote absentee because we don't have precincts everywhere. And if we're at large, we already had this comfort level because that's what we did. So a little bit about me still is why Cara? Well, I'm a small business owner. We've had this business, my husband has, since 1998, and I've taken it over the last 7 years and grown it. That's while being his boss. So I don't know if there's any other business owner, but if you are a business owner with your spouse, that is an extra struggle, and we've managed through that. Good, bad, and ugly, we're there. So we've been able to grow that business, and I want to take some of those practices to the Cherokee Nation and really support our small business owners, really lift them up. I remember during the pandemic, they're issuing all these mandates about closing doors, you can't do this, you can't do that. And we're a member of ABC Contractors, and we were able to go out and say, no, we're going to continue working, right? Because we're mission critical, we're doing transmission power lines and those kind of things. But while I'm struggling, begging my cousin who owns a liquor store for the Everclear that he finds somewhere to make hand sanitizer to stay on job sites because it's that bad, we've got the Cherokee Nation taking my federal tax dollars, all of our federal tax dollars, making PPE, but not sharing it with any small business, not even offering, not saying a word. They never once talked about the programs that were going to help us keep our doors open, or even asked once, what do you need? That's all we're trying to keep our doors open. And in Oklahoma, the Department of Commerce will tell you that 80% of the jobs in Oklahoma are supported by small businesses. But not once did Cherokee business owners or any of our small businesses hear from the Cherokee Nation, to my knowledge. Not once.
Because Chuck Hoskin is busy doing other things.
Oh, we're going to get on that. Yeah. So we have the ability to do a lot of innovative things as a government. And I know that government is all over the place, probably for everyone in this room, about what the role of government is, how it should be limited. As an Indian person, all I know is government. That doesn't make it right, but it's interesting. If you're a Native person, you know what paperwork's like. You know what it is to fill out paperwork. We are inundated with government. The federal government, our tribal government, state, county, whatever it is, we should all know as an Indian person how to be under governance. But the idea is that with McGirt, and I will tell you, I fully support McGirt in the fact that our tribe has sovereignty. I don't want to take away from that. What I do want to see is a government that takes responsibility for the sovereignty that they have. That's right. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we have not created business certainty. And I know that as a small business owner. So how many of you have a small business maybe? Okay, so regulations and those things. And I'm gonna take a foray because I'm just gonna ask that please get out and educate people on the medical marijuana. This has nothing to do with mine, but I'm gonna take a privilege for a moment. We have an internal trucking company inside our company that I've created in order to maintain CDL drivers, because the regulations on CDL drivers has gotten outrageous. If you want to know why you can't get your package, I'm going to give you a hint, and part of it is our medical marijuana issues already in the state of Oklahoma. So apparently 2/3 of the state of Oklahoma has a medical marijuana license. So I have a safety sensitive company. Bob Jack knows what that's about. We can't escape that. Either our customers mandate it, our safety practices mandate it, or our insurance says, heck no, you can't do that. I mean, who wants their crane operator, right? Heavy equipment, whatever this is, we can't do that. So how many of you have to hire and you can't even get somebody to show up for a job? Yeah. Then when I get them to show up, I tell them up front, you're going to have to pass a UA. I guess they don't know what a UA is. And I tell you, yeah. And I talk about, so I've spent a considerable amount of money drug testing folks that can't make it into day one because they thought they were going to be exempted by a medical marijuana card. Secretary Osborne told me in a meeting when I was in a small business development center meeting that over 700,000 people in Oklahoma left our job economy for cash jobs in the pot industry when medical marijuana was licensed. So if you wonder why your local eatery establishment dried up and closed their doors, why basic jobs can't function, they suddenly started making $20. And as a small business owner, I know what taxes I pay. I don't know if they're paying those taxes. I have no idea. I don't know if they're paying workers' comp. I don't know if they're paying unemployment insurance. These are real issues impacting our state. I can't imagine what recreational marijuana looks like. I just can't. We are already dysfunctional in terms of a labor market. And if you follow labor market issues, we are already short because I wasn't able to have babies. My husband and I, we tried. We just couldn't. My generation, for choice, for health issues, whatever that is, could not replace the baby boomer population. So if you look at national statistics, and that includes Oklahoma, our available labor market has shrunk. So imagine when the pandemic impacts and medical marijuana, and by the way, the Dirty Jobs guy says that over 7 million able-bodied men between 25 and 34 are sitting on a couch somewhere as far as they can tell. They don't know where they went.
Gaming.
That's just the men. I mean, that is just the men, right? I don't even know what the women's population look like. And by the way, I actively recruit women for our construction company. So yeah, and that's because other people have not showed up that traditionally filled that role. Okay, so that's my side note. There's real reasons why we all need to get out and drag our neighbors with us, assuming they are like-minded, when that comes up for the vote pretty quickly. So in terms of an economy, I realize those issues. I have heard the current leadership of the Cherokee Nation talk about those issues this many times. Zero. If we're at our health clinics, because in Indian country we traditionally have provided health infrastructure, which I think mainstream government didn't realize the importance of health infrastructure until we started seeing the drying up of our rural medical hospitals under the pandemic that saw the additional stress of the financials, and we wondered why government's involved in healthcare to that degree. Well, we've always had that because in Indian country, especially on reservations, you couldn't get doctors to the table. They weren't going to set up clinics inside a reservation. So IHS is formed before I was born. I've always benefited from that infrastructure, but that's why Cherokee Nation has this hospital system now with clinics throughout, because it has to be provided. Otherwise, in many of our communities, that health infrastructure just doesn't exist. So who cleans those facilities? Who makes those facilities up? And by the way, if you weren't already aware then of this greater labor market shortage, did you know that we don't have enough slots in medical school or nursing? Anyway, this was before all of this. So during the pandemic, this administration, the current administration of the Cherokee Nation, laid off 8 or 9 primary care physicians. Do you think we've been able to replace those people? We have not. So if you are a tribal citizen that utilizes our facility, under the Affordable Care Act, whether you like it or not, it restructured everything, and the primary care physician is the focal point of how a patient navigates a healthcare system. Whether you have your own private insurance or whether you're at like a socialized medicine facility like us. So suddenly people can't get appointments. Or they only have a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant in many of our facilities with very little oversight, maybe 1 MD or DO per like 8 or 9 nurse practitioners and such. It has put a tremendous strain on our facilities. We have, just like everyone else, an aging population with a significant number of elders. In Cherokee Nation, those elders are critical. That's our culture, our language. This administration has epically failed them. They're epically failing our families. They have changed everything. But obviously, I could go on and on about healthcare. So let's talk about how they have continued to put a strain on our labor market by mandating 5 vaccine shots. They just now, in the last 6 months, have opened up our government. So by the way, these same people passed like 140% or something pay raises for themselves, for council, chief, and deputy chief right before they opened up our meetings. But for COVID, you couldn't come. So the last time before COVID, the whole place was full of elders giving the mean mug to all these people, and they ran scared and flipped their votes and didn't vote to pass it through. But now they waited until the COVID, under the cloak of COVID, that they would shut off our government to these very same community members. If you haven't figured out, Cherokee elections are very intense and entertaining, and they're very engaging. Like, so even though there's 20,000 people, the whole tribe starts suddenly waking up and getting involved every 2 to 4 years, right?
We're familiar with that process.
Oh, yes, yes. So we have a whole flavor, and I used to look forward to Cherokee elections because it meant family reunions and birthdays, and it was a lot of fun. But this group, with the Democratic National Party running them, has intensified and made it something that's not fun anymore. They do ballot harvesting. They go and actively do a whole absentee ballot campaign in a way that we never saw before. It used to be our Cherokee grandmas or aunties would be in charge. There'd be family reunions, these annual events. And at those events, the family would gather up. They might invite all the candidates to come. And it was very democratic. I mean, it was very engaging. It was a true government in the sense that we understood what was going on. Now they pay operatives to come in, go door to door, and talk to people that have no idea what's going on, and they take their ballots among many other Chicago-style neighborhood politics. So that's what we're up against. So when I'm asking for people to do absentee ballots, I know that's very uncomfortable, but we do have a history of it. We just don't have a history of it in this way. So I'm asking that all of us act as our own agents, go out, work in our families, be that grandma, be that auntie, and help us engage those voters in a way that informs them, because they've taken our Cherokee Phoenix, which used to be a historical free press, they gutted it, took its entire budget, pushed everyone out, put in PR folks instead of journalists, it used to be free to all our citizens if you wrote in for it. They took it. This started under Bill John Baker. And then they have gifted it back to us using COVID federal tax dollars. And it's free to your home under the PR guise. So at this time, the only people that can change us is us. Cherokee citizens have responsibility to change our government, to be good to ourselves, our future generations, and our neighbors. We have an obligation to stand up. We have to be counted. If we are not, and we let them suppress the vote like they did in 2019 when they kicked my running mate, David Walkingstick, off the ballot 2 weeks before the election, then we are the ones that are ultimately accountable. The only way a dictator survives is when we let them survive. I mean, you may see it differently, but that's what I see. Cherokee citizens have a responsibility to ourselves, to our future generations, in the state of Oklahoma. So there's a lot of innovation that can be done. This group didn't think about the impact to citizenship and registration when they threw out the $2,000. So now, because of the overload in the registration department, it is 2 to 5 years for a grandchild or child of next generation to get their card. You can't get a hold of anyone. They do this loop-de-loo. They took out the people that used to answer our phones, and they put a call center from Mexico or New Mexico in, and you can't get a hold. It's chaos. So I want to take my engineering brain, small business experience, and go in and set this house in order. I think there's an opportunity in this labor market to honor the employees that are still there and new employees by streamlining our government, automating what we can, and getting people the time and energy as employees that if you're a new patient at our clinic, that we would have employees, instead of doing paperwork repeatedly, that actually get to sit down and talk about patients' rights. How do things work? Who do you call? How do you get an appointment? You know, put effort into recruiting the next generation of the medical doctors or anesthesiologists and nurse practitioners, or even the janitors, because we're failing at every level. So take the energy of those employees, make sense out of it. So if we're going to have this kind of government, we need to do our job. We haven't even got to McGirt. So McGirt, it is not a problem in the sense that the tribe has authority. They've always had authority. Whether you realize it or not, there was authority there. If you've lived anywhere near a reservation, we had reservation type land throughout northeastern Oklahoma as well as in Tulsa. If you've been to a smoke shop, you've essentially been on a reservation, okay? So you were suddenly in a federal enclave of sorts. So it's always been there. That jurisdiction has just been broadened. So what happens if you as a business owner has somebody come in and steal from you, either internally or externally, and you are the Indian person or that person is Indian, and you're in Indian country? It is not going to be prosecuted. Right now, they can tell you, I think Muskogee Nation's doing a decent job. Sheriff may disagree with me, I don't know. But right now, the Cherokee Nation is declining to prosecute rapes, molestations, burglaries, arsons, whatever this is, they're declining. And I have law enforcement that say they have handed stuff over with a bow on it that's complete, and they are saying that the Attorney General's office that they lack the evidence to move forward.
I guess with car stealing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so if you get your car stolen, you'll just be lucky to get it back. That's if you're a tribal citizen or the perpetrator is a citizen. We had an individual who's a professional, I'm not going to name names. He was on his own property near Fort Gibson with his, I think, 14-year-old daughter. They were probably out gathering traditional plants. 3 hunters came on from Fort Gibson Lake onto his property. He had the foresight to have her hide in the woods. He asked these people to leave because they were trespassing. They proceeded to pistol whip him and break his ribs and send him to the emergency room. Fort Gibson police pulled the 3 hunters over because they're pulling a boat. This was easy to identify. I mean, we're all from rural Oklahoma, even in Tulsa, right? You can find these things. This is not rocket science. They identified them, pulled them over, and called the Marshal Service, asked what wanted to happen because the person was Cherokee that was attacked, and they declined to even file a report or have him held and arrested or consider it. They just let him go. Apparently, yeah. So, and what do we even know, like, if you're going to get proper justice if there's a murder? That's a big question.
Is that because of manpower or?
So there's like 55 marshals the last time somebody told me. From what I understand, it is the responsibility of the current leadership that they are declining to prosecute cases, is what I've been told, by external law enforcement as well as internal folks, and victims and things that happen. If you are concerned about DUIs or that business owner that runs the motor vehicle records because you have an internal company, and you have insurance, or maybe you're an insurance carrier provider. If somebody gets a DUI in the Cherokee Nation, you will not be able to find a record of it, and it is not reported to MVR. None of this is acceptable. So I came here, you always have to fire an incumbent. You always have to, whether you want to or not. But there's a lot of exciting things. We have to, at this point, I believe an economy drives a self-sufficient Cherokee Nation. And I like the idea that Cherokee citizens and their families are self-sufficient. I think that's critical. I mean, I think that's so important. It starts resolving generational trauma and all the other things that we end up dealing with inside the Cherokee Nation. And it just makes sense for all of our economies. I am a U.S. citizen, I'm a Cherokee Nation citizen, and I'm a resident of Oklahoma, and I'm proud of all three. So when I look at terms of how we are creating a self-sufficient Cherokee Nation for the future, we are failing. So I would like to change that. I would like the opportunity to double down on education, make sure that we have Cherokee citizens that are going out and getting medical degrees, paying for those medical degrees and having them on contract come back to serve in the Cherokee Nation, whether it's at one of our facilities or another facility, even if they open a private clinic inside the Cherokee Nation. That includes dental, eyeglasses, all the things that serve us, as long as it's creating a vibrant economy in northeastern Oklahoma. Because when our neighbors thrive, typically we thrive, and when we thrive, our neighbors can thrive. I just think that northeast Oklahoma needs more options, and when you have $3.2 billion from the federal government come to the Cherokee Nation, and the state of and that's 14 counties or less, and then you have 77 counties in the state of Oklahoma, but this Oklahoma only gets $2.8 billion. Our streets should be gilded in gold. That is generational changing money, and I can't tell that there's any difference after it's all said and done. So I want to take the gifts that God gave me, and I want to put them to work. That is what I'm asking. I have an incredible running mate, David Walking Stick. He is, you may have even heard from him before, I can't remember. David also believes that we have an obligation to care for our elders and our families, and that the things that are happening around medical freedoms and other liberty, issues of freedoms and liberty, we have got to change those. They closed our top-notch school, Sequoia High School, down. I think it just now opened up just in the last 6 months. I had an extra daughter go in to have a baby at Hastings Hospital 3 weeks ago, and they limited it to one family member. This was 3 weeks ago. This doesn't build community. This doesn't build family. This doesn't build the things that we need to thrive into the future, and I want an opportunity to change that. It's late. It's a weeknight. It's a school night. I'm going to end there. I know we have questions probably.
I'm coming.
Jack, yes.
I'm coming with the microphone.
And I have cards, and I have donation forms. And yes, you can donate. You don't have to be Cherokee.
I am not anywhere close to being Native American. I am so far remote from that as you can't believe. But this lady's been a friend of mine for a long time. I financially support this lady in what she does. David Walking Stick is just a prince of a man. Chuck Hoskins is a crook in my mind. And his predecessor was like a double crook in my mind. She's smiling. And I've done business as a contractor for the nation, and I know how bad it is. And they need some change in leadership in this nation. And I think this is the right lady for it. You got to remember, Chuck's a solid liberal Democrat, and we got a conservative Republican, even though they don't talk about political parties. But Chuck is a solid, he loves his Democratic buddies up in Washington, D.C. And it's time we have a change in that organization, because it does have a major effect on Oklahoma, major effect on what happens in Tulsa. And if you know somebody that's a member of this tribe, I really encourage you to talk to him on behalf of Cara, because she's the right person for the job.
Thank you.
So let's also remember that, the question I guess I was going to ask Cara is, of the almost $10 million or $50 million that was spent against our governor in the race just recently, how would that have benefited your people if it had been spent on the people and not against an individual?
Yeah, so just to clarify what Rhonda, and thank you for having me tonight, Rhonda, and the whole team. It was either 16 million, but it was 16 million supposedly from the casinos. That's what we first heard. There's no transparency or accountability, so we may not know until there's an audit, because you're going to help put me in office to do that. But he was bragging in Oklahoma City that it was 50 million out of our casinos. No authority in the way I view our Constitution and the obligations of each branch of government and how the business is chartered, and the Indian Gaming Rights Act, how IGRA is worked. They had no authority to do that. And the rumor is it was 50. So 16 or 50, it doesn't matter, because what I found out is we have folks that are dying from cancer waiting for contract health because there's no money in the budget. And our fiscal year is a government fiscal year, federal fiscal year, so it's October. So all of this would have been happening when we needed that money, but yet we tell elders and other speakers. I know of at least 2 Cherokee speakers that died this last year alone, waiting at home for Contract Health to call them because of cancer. And they didn't have money.
Wow.
So he's out. By the way, he used some of that COVID money. I think it was 8 or 9 million to buy. Does anyone know? Go Keatonville Hill, Highway 20, Owasso, and there's the old soccer arena. They used your federal COVID dollars, mine too, to buy the soccer arena for food distribution during COVID, and quickly turned it into a media center. And it's a sound stage so they can make those shiny videos to tell us all how great they are and what they're doing and how great it is at the Cherokee Nation.
Wow. This gentleman has a question.
Yes.
What is the real gripe between Governor Stitt and the Indian nations? Do you know?
I can't speak for Governor Stitt and I can't speak for Hoskins, but I can speak to what I've witnessed and watched roll out. So Governor Stitt is a Cherokee Nation citizen and should have been treated with respect from the beginning. Instead, Hoskins and his cronies, the Democratic National Party running the Cherokee Nation, there's a woman, Kaylin Free, if you're familiar with the folks that in Tulsa market, she's the real puppet master behind what's going on in the Cherokee Nation. So, and if you looked on your ballot, she would have been under Clinton and Obama and all that, her and Baker and Hoskins in the nominees when you go to vote in Oklahoma, right, is the one standing up. So from the beginning, Hoskins didn't support Stitt and did everything to go against him and verbally went against him. Never tried to establish a relationship. Then the two have continued to have that kind of relationship and then spent even more money and doubled down on it. I can't tell that there's been one real attempt at a respectful conversation, and that is unfortunate. So here's my outlook. The only person I can control is me.
Right.
And the reason I like to run for Cherokee politics is I feel like we can be innovative, and I expect more from us. So I can't talk about mainstream. I always want to work with everybody. I told you how I survived the pandemic with my husband and I'm his boss. So I can work with anyone, okay, over a long period of time. But Hoskins has poked and poked and poked. And that is all he cares about is party line stuff. I want to restore the Cherokee Nation to the Cherokee people and nonpartisanship. I want to work across all the aisles and build a better Oklahoma, a better Cherokee Nation. And that's not the perspective that they're coming from. And that's what I watched.
One other thing.
Yes.
Does the Cherokee Nation own private aircraft, jet aircraft?
Not to my knowledge. So interestingly enough, that's the deal that killed a Republican, Chad Smith. If you remember Chief Chad Smith, that was the issue that shot his election down. And that was a used aircraft. When I first got on tribal council, because there was a plane with Cherokee Nation businesses, and Wilma used to ride in this plane. I mean, they would have to go do stuff. But I remember getting in this plane, and I'm like in my 20s when I get on tribal council, and they picked me up in Tulsa to go to Oklahoma City. I was like, I don't have time to drive, because I was having to help Chief Smith. I get in there, and the original plane, you could see daylight out the door. It wouldn't shut completely. And I'm in there with the deputy chief, the speaker, I'm the deputy speaker, and some key staff. If we'd gone down, this would have been bad, right? So everybody has to, whether we like it or not, there's expenses for continuity of leadership, right? So they talked, the board and everybody got a used, not jet, but a nicer used prop plane. It was a little bit, there was no hole. You couldn't see daylight or hear wind coming through. And they took that issue and they fired Chad Smith with that issue. Now, to my knowledge, we've looked, we haven't found it. They do not have one, but that doesn't surprise me if they would.
I work at the airport.
Ooh.
I work for Avis Car Rental.
Okay.
And we were delivering a car to U.S. Aviation, and I saw this nice, beautiful jet aircraft sitting there with a big symbol on the tail. And so I go in and hand the guy the keys in there and said, Who owns that aircraft? Oh, that's Chickasaw Nation.
So that's Governor Anatubby and them. They do. They have
Boy. They spent a lot of money that they could have spent cheaper, bought a cheaper craft. That thing was big. It was huge.
She can't fix that.
Yeah, I can't fix
She can only
Chickasaws.
fix the
I only have Cherokees. But, yeah.
That was the thing that kind of got me. And one time I was at a powwow for the Kiowas, and my girlfriend and I sat there and talked to a couple of old ladies, and they said, this tribe, these leaders we got now don't know how to spend money. All they do is spend money on frivolous things, blah, 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 blah. And they were really unhappy. Yeah. And that happens to
So
everybody.
I'm a fiscal conservative. That doesn't mean I don't know how to spend money to make money. But I feel like you have to be responsible, transparent, and accountable. It's that simple. That's what all government should be.
So I'm going to ask a question real quick because your race is going to have 3 people running for chief. You've got
There's 4.
Oh, there's 4. So does this go to a runoff? Does it require a 50% plus 1, or is it just whoever gets the most votes wins?
It's 50% plus 1, and I'm trying to account for a margin of corruption. So I need our Cherokees to show up really big, and if you have noticed, if Rhonda and all of them, if we haven't reached out to the folks that we feel are like-minded to start visiting, have you heard anything about this election? We've been doing, and there's some folks that work around the Cherokee Nation in the room today. We've been campaigning for over a year quietly, but December 3rd, this all started. And still, if he was doing a great job, don't you think he would have been ringing that bell really loud?
Yeah.
He is not. And then an article came out in the Cherokee Phoenix where our election registration has been flat since 2 years ago. In fact, we lost people because we roll out the deceased folks off, and they talk about it in the article.
So the next question is going to be, when do you have to either file to vote or get your absentee ballot, and how do you go? Yeah, how do you go about voting?
I'm going to go behind you and grab
That's
a packet
fine.
and show you.
And then when is your election? Is it in person, or is it only absentee, or how do you do it? Because this is one of the things that really fascinates me is the difference in the way that we hold elections. And so it's amazing to me, just because here we have a group of people within a state that we operate under, and it's done completely differently. So I want Cara to be able to explain to you how they do what their process looks like.
So this is a Cherokee Nation voter form. It's a 1-page. You can email it into the Election Commission. You can mail it to the Election Commission. It's 1 page. They will verify that they're a Cherokee Nation citizen. And then there's like a card that comes from our election commission. We have an independent election commission appointed by council and the chief and affirmed through that process publicly. And then, so you have to go, if you live inside the Cherokee Nation, you have to vote in the district that you live in, and you can pick the precinct you want to. Like if you work in Oologah, but you live in Claremore, if you know it's a Saturday election and you work Saturdays, you may want to actually pick Oologah. So it's a little bit different from mainstream, that it doesn't have to be where you live as long as it's inside your district. Then there's and that's March 31st of this year. There's a deadline for this June 3rd election, and we vote on Saturdays because traditionally we would come together on Saturdays, so it's not a Tuesday election. We run them on Saturdays. So one day, there is early walk-in voting the Saturday before, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before, only in Tahlequah. So we have people with resources that will fly their whole families in if they don't get their ballots. But that's very few people can do that.
Okay, is that form available online?
It is. It is. Mm-hmm. So you can, but it's kind of hard to find, of course, on their website. You can find it on my website, caracowanwatts.com. And we've set up a jot form where you can do it on your phone. It will email the signed copy to you, the voter, with instructions to send it to the Election Commission. And therefore, you have a copy of it as well. Then you have until April 10th to register for a request an absentee ballot, which is a different form. That's also online on my website in a jot form. April 10th. And that can be emailed in as well to give you a guarantee. And to give you an idea of the 14 counties, this is a map of the 14 counties. And there are 15 districts inside the Cherokee Nation, political districts, over 14 counties more or less, meaning we have a bunch of partial counties. And then there are 2 at-large council members. So there's 17 total. It's a unicameral government, meaning one single branch for legislation. So,
Did anybody else have any other questions for Cara? Hang on, Sean. Hang on.
I just looked it up in Washington State. We have the Cherokee Nation of the Puget Sound. And I have Cherokee cousins out there, so I might get you a couple votes.
very good.
I didn't even know that until she told me.
Yeah, so at-large, anyone,
I just need to figure out the, I got to tell them to get the mail-in ballots.
they can email or text me, and I can send them the jot forms or whatever else, or you can go to caracowanwatts.com
In fact, my mom.
or text.
Is Cheryl Cherokee? Yeah, why?
I appreciate that.
Hang
How
on.
old do they have to be to vote?
18. And what's interesting is, as long as they're 18 on or by June 3rd, they could have to still register by March 31st. So if you've got grandbabies, nephews, and nieces, and they're turning 18, let's get them registered.
Did you know that you have a lot of citizens in Hawaii?
I haven't looked at that data on Hawaii because I can't go door knock there. So I could, but that would distract from everything else. I might stay. So yeah, so I'm sure we do because I know one of my girlfriends is there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of natives there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So what is the percent of Indian blood now for a CDIV card, or is it any draw? I've heard the rumor of any draw.
Repeat her question. And so that
Okay, so she asked if there is a blood quantum requirement for the Cherokee Nation. There was a blood quantum requirement in that you had to descend by blood from the Cherokee Nation rolls or the Shawnees or Delawares that were adopted in by treaty. But now with the freedmen, there is, at least for them, there's no blood requirement. But everyone else, it's just descendancy.
What if we identify
Yeah.
as Cherokee?
Yeah. So.
Asking for a friend. So, hey, listen, with no other questions, we're going to go ahead and dismiss for the evening. Remind you that there are elections on February the 14th, and I did completely forget to talk about the recreational marijuana that's on the ballot on March 7th. That's the only thing that's on the ballot on March 7th. And everyone in the state gets to vote on it. That's an eligible voter. So that's a date that you're going to have to remember to get out, and we'll send out emails to remind you to get out and vote on March 7th because, listen, this was a ballot initiative. That means that there was a group of people that came in from out of state that ran a ballot initiative that wrote this language. Our legislature, in reality, should have gotten in front of this and at least given us a different bill, a different one to be able to vote on as well. So you can vote for, you could have voted for one or the other, but they chose not to. This is poorly written. It's going to cause us more problems than anything else. And so I would encourage you to make sure that you get out and vote March 7th and that you get everybody else out to vote March 7th. And then don't forget to see Laura Burkett if you're interested in making a comment in regard to Planet Tulsa. We'll see you guys again on March 9th. Happy Valentine's Day, and remember, nothing says I love you like a bond issue.